Alrighty. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on introducing the Elder Justice Initiative Victim Specialist resource page. My name is Lena Reed, and I'm the Operations Manager for OVC TTAC, and I'm going to be serving as the moderator for the event today. Before we get started, I want to make sure that everyone can hear the audio for the session. The audio for today's session is going to play through your phone line only, so please make sure that you've dialed into the number that you see on the screen, and I'm going to pause for just a moment to see if anyone is having any difficulty in hearing. If so, you can kind of type a message in the chat box. So let me just pause for a moment. I'm not seeing any messages that folks, all right, I am getting a message that it's a little hard to hear, so let me turn my volume up. Is that a little bit better? I'm just waiting for some of the feedback to come in. Okay, it looks like some folks can hear clearly. However, there are a few folks that are still not able to hear. Danielle has put the telephone number and the passcode that everyone wants to be using to make sure that you can all hear clearly this afternoon. So I'll pause again just to make sure that folks can dial in. As you all know, we can experience some challenges with technology, and so during the session, if you have any problems, please be patient, remain online. If you have an individual technical problem, go ahead and please type a private chat message to Danielle McLean. She's our technical specialist for today. Or if you prefer, feel free to send Danielle an email at the address on your screen. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. I don't want to wait too long, so I just wanted to also let folks know that we are recording today's session, and the recording will be available on the OVC TTAC webinars page if for some reason you're not able to stay with us for the entire time. Also, if you have any questions for our presenters or would like to communicate while the webinar is in progress, feel free to type your questions or comments in the feedback box, and we will get to them as we go along or towards the end of our presentation. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and move on and turn this over to our first presenter, Maria Shumar. She's a victim specialist consultant with DOJ on the Elder Justice Initiative. So Maria, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you.
Okay, great. Hello and welcome to our presentation today about the Department of Justice's Elder Justice Initiative website, and in particular our Victim Specialist webpage. My name is Maria Shumar, and I am a Victim Specialist Consultant with the Elder Justice Initiative. I worked on the front lines with domestic violence, sex assault, and older victims of all types of crimes for 22 years. And with me today is Keely Frank, a Senior Service Specialist at the National Center for Victims of Crime. She has been working with older victims for several years now and is currently operating with the Victim Connect Resource Center. Frontline professionals, whether you are systems-based or community-based, and others who work with the older population face special challenges, and we want you to know that we have your back. We have been on the front lines and understand how difficult your job can be and also how rewarding. We hope that this webinar about the website will be helpful to you in your advocacy efforts as you provide direct service to older victims by helping you with information, resources, and training so that you can help support your older victims and keep them safe. Now let's take our first polling question. Is this the first time you've been to the Elder Justice Initiative site? All right. So we got about 50-50 here. So about half of you have been and half have not. So let's talk a little bit about victim specialists. The role of victim specialists is very important because we often have the opportunity to see the bigger picture as we are in touch with so many of the people and the organizations that a victim will encounter. Often the victim specialist is one of the first people to meet with an older victim. We provide a listening ear and learn about their experience. We provide crisis intervention, safety plans, referrals, and resources. We provide information on victims' rights, accompany victims to court, update them about their cases, and make sure they understand court proceedings. We are often the link between the victim and the prosecutors or the agencies and can assist in educating our partners who are unfamiliar with elder abuse. Next, we're going to talk about why should we care about elder abuse, but let's take our next polling question. So have any of you worked with older victims or survivors before? Wow, a lot of you have. That's great. That's good to know. So about 79% of you said yes, and about 20% of you said no. So why care about working with older victims? Because all victims from very young to very old deserve respect. We are seeing a rise in the senior population, and with an increase in seniors comes an increased risk of this population becoming victims of abuse. Many older victims have a disability of some type, and this makes them even more vulnerable, so they're often chosen as targets by perpetrators. And elder abuse, as we know, is so underreported. Only 1 in 44 cases of financial abuse is reported, and only 1 in 23 cases of elder abuse is reported to Adult Protective Services. Many professionals have not had training on elder abuse, and the public is generally ill-informed and unequipped to prevent or report. After all, elder abuse is often called the hidden problem, so the lack of awareness is widespread. And then we have the societal attitudes. There is still an it's a family matter kind of mindset, as we have seen in child abuse cases when it comes to elder abuse. Experts say that we are 3 decades behind the fields of child abuse and domestic violence. In addition, one can say that ageism, which is the stereotyping of seniors as infantile, senile, or lacking in capacity, also contributes to the lack of support for older victims of crime. Now I'm going to turn it over to Keely to talk some more about why we should care.
Thanks, Maria. Like Maria said, typical societal attitudes do not support older victims of crime, and as such, these victims tend to fall through the cracks in our justice system. Whether this is caused by agencies not communicating with each other, victims not being identified, or because when older victims do come forward, their claims are not taken seriously, there are an infinite number of reasons why victims of elder abuse are continuously overlooked. Older adults may also be very reluctant to speak up about their abuse for fear of retaliation from the offender. The offender may be the only person that has been able to go out and get their medication or groceries. It could be their primary caregiver, their only living family member, or maybe it's the spouse that they've been with for 50 years and the thought of being single for the first time in decades is terrifying. They may also be ashamed that at their age they're experiencing abuse. They may feel embarrassed if they fell for a scam or feel that what they're going through is a private family issue that shouldn't leave the house. Additionally, you may find in cases of elder abuse that threats of institutionalization are used to prevent the older adult from seeking support. For someone that's lived independently their entire lives, the threat of being put into long-term care can be debilitating, and many older adults would rather stay in a household of abuse than risk leaving their home. We also can't overlook the possibility that more than one type of abuse is occurring. The older adult that has been in a relationship that has domestic violence for 50 years may also be experiencing financial exploitation by their grown children. Or the older adult that is being emotionally manipulated by his visiting nurse could also be experiencing sexual abuse by his grandson when he comes to visit. Because of the effects of natural aging compounded with the often multiple layers of abuse that older adults experience, older victims of crime are twice as likely to suffer injury than younger victims, and also have a mortality rate that is 3 times higher than that of older adults that have not experienced abuse. So how can victim specialists help? Well, knowing what you now know about the complexities of elder abuse, what can victim specialists do to assist older victims of crime as they move through the criminal justice system? You've already taken the first step, which is to educate yourself. The world of elder abuse is immense, intricate, and can be overwhelming. But by jumping in head first, you'll be miles ahead of those that think victimization stops by age 60, if only offenders could be so considerate. Along with educating yourself, it is important that all of us stay on top of the types of crimes currently impacting older adults, and acknowledge that there is no one type of crime that is specific to older adults. Murder, sexual assault, robbery, hate crimes, vehicular crimes, stalking, domestic violence, you name it, and it can and will happen to older adults. The next thing you can do is to take what you learn about elder abuse and educate staff at your agency, not only on the basics of elder abuse, but also on how you'll be interacting with older victims, what types of crime your agency will be working on, what policies and practice your agency may need to develop or improve to better serve older victims, and even how your agency will respond if an older staff member comes forward as a victim of a crime. Something we often do is think of older victims as other and forget that anyone can be a victim of a crime. Learning how elder abuse can have an impact on our fellow coworkers, neighbors, family members, or even ourselves will really pay off if and when the situation arises and we need resources immediately. I think what will be a great add-on to all of the knowledge you'll gain from looking into elder abuse will be a comfortability with working with older adults that a lot of people not in this field may not have. Elder abuse is one of those icky topics that people not in the aging community are not eager to talk about. And it's only going to come from all of you taking the time to learn about elder abuse and working with this population that it will hopefully lose its ick factor and be something we can confront head-on together. Probably the best thing I can tell providers when I'm asked how to work with or talk to older victims is that you already have the skills to do it. It's really just about listening to the victim, letting them tell their story at their own pace and in their own words, because you may be the only person they've ever opened up to about it. Just like with talking to any victim, you want to show respect and sensitivity as they're talking. Talking about a time when they were abused, neglected, exploited, whatever the situation may be, is not going to be a comfortable experience. But they're speaking to you about it, and will only continue to do so if they feel that they're in a safe, judgment-free environment. A big part of your role as a victim advocate will be to empower the older victim in a time when all control has already been taken away from them. You can do this by taking your time and letting them go at their own pace when they're telling their story, by acknowledging that they may use different terminology when speaking about the crime than you do, which has nothing to do with intelligence level, but may simply be a generational difference, by letting them work through what happened to them and frame it in a way that makes the most sense to them, even if it doesn't make sense to you, by letting them acknowledge and try to accept that someone they may still care about has hurt them, by not asking leading questions that may imply that there is a right or wrong answer, by accepting that their affect might not match what you expected for someone that has just gone through a traumatic experience, and by accepting that they may be in better shape than you and put up one heck of a fight when you would have just curled up into a ball. As a victim advocate, you're there for support, to connect the older adult with resources and services that can assist them, and to guide them through the criminal justice process. This will only be done if you view the older victim as your equal who happens to need assistance, rather than someone as frail that needs to be protected. I'll pass it back to Maria now to talk to you about resources, but before that, let's do another polling question.
So we'll take polling question number 3.
So, would any of you like more training on elder abuse?
Wow.
Oh, so it looks like most people said yes. That's great.
That's great for us to know. Thank you so much for answering our polling question. Now we're going to talk about the mission of the Elder Justice Initiative. The mission is to support and coordinate the Department of Justice's enforcement and programmatic efforts to combat elder abuse, neglect, and financial fraud and scams that target older adults. We do this by promoting justice for older adults, helping older victims and their families, enhancing state and local efforts through training and resources, and supporting research to improve elder abuse policy and practice. Now we're going to take a look at the live Elder Justice Initiative site. We want to point out several parts of the site that may be beneficial to victim specialists. Great. That worked well. So here we are on our home page of the Elder Justice Initiative. And as you can see, we have a carousel here of rotating pictures. And each of these represents a web page on our site. Also, over here on the left is our left navigation, which also shows the same web pages. We have a safe exit button here, and this would be for a victim or someone, a family member searching about elder abuse who quickly wants to exit the page. They can click this button, and it takes them to the National Weather Service with no evidence of them having been on the Elder Justice site at all. We also have a Report Abuse or Find Help button here, which I'm going to click on so you can see what happens. And of course, if there's an emergency, we're advising them to call 911. Non-life-threatening emergencies, they can call the Elder Care Locator to find services, or call the Victim Connect hotline, which Keely is going to talk about in more detail later in the presentation. We have a Report Abuse to Adult Protective Services. By clicking here, you're going to go to the National Adult Protective Services Agency's map, where you can click on your state to find the hotline for Adult Protective Services so that you can make a report. And this is the Elder Justice Initiative map. This is where you can find resources by entering your zip code or clicking on a state. Today we're going to click on a state. And because Keely's from Pennsylvania, we're going to click on Pennsylvania. Here we go. So here we are, and this is going to show us all types of victim services because I'm going to check victim services here and do a search. It'll show us all the victim services in Pennsylvania. So we start off with a task force. We have consumer protection groups, all the way to CARI, which is a victim services program in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So we highly advise you using this resource. It's a great way to find help in your area. We're going to go back to the home page, where I'm going to talk to you about our next section, which is victims, families, and caregivers. Let's click on that. On this section, you're going to find all types of elder abuse: physical, psychological, financial, neglect, and sexual abuse. Here's also that Find Help Near You button again. That's in case someone on here is searching and needs help right away. So let's try the physical abuse section and see what happens. Here we're going to find stories of abuse. You're going to find questions under did this happen to you? And you're going to find warning signs of abuse. This is a great tool to use, whether it be for yourself to educate yourself about elder abuse, or for family members or actual victims you're working with who may not recognize or want to recognize that they are experiencing abuse. As you can see on our left nav, we have all the types of abuse listed. Now we're going to turn to financial exploitation, and Keely's going to talk to us about that page.
So like Maria previously said, financial abuse is considered extremely underreported. So we wanted to give you some resources that you can use if you come across any cases of financial exploitation. So on the left nav, if you happen to click on financial exploitation, you'll find right here where we have the Elder Abuse Resource Roadmap. Right below this button where you can click on the roadmap, you'll see that you can download the full document. But first I'm going to show you what it looks like when you click through the roadmap by using an example. So if you click on the roadmap, let's say you meet with an older adult that was at the grocery store and realized her bag was stolen out of her cart. In her bag was her wallet. The first button that you want to click on of who caused you financial loss is a stranger, because in this situation she's at the store, didn't see who did it, so it's a stranger. Next, because in her bag was her wallet, we're going to say it took money without permission, because what did the stranger do? Took her wallet, which had her money, and she didn't see them, nor did she say, okay, yes, you can take that. What happened? Well, not only was her license and all identifying information in there, but as what happens with a lot of older adults, she also had her Medicaid card in her wallet. So we're going to click on Lost or Stolen Government Benefits. And because in this case it happened to be Medicaid, we click on Medicaid, and you can see it brings you right here where you can find out that there's something called Medicaid Fraud Control Units, and here are some examples of cases that they investigate. If you were to click on this big button right here, it would take you to the National Association of Medicaid Fraud Units, where you can find your local office and would then be able to provide her with more assistance for reporting her card stolen. If you go back to financial exploitation, you'll see next to the roadmap is something called Senior Scam Alert. And these are the most common scams affecting seniors right now. So if you've worked with older adults, you've probably heard of a few of these, like the IRS scam, sweepstakes and lottery scams, sweetheart scams, or romance scams. Each link, when you click on it, will show you a brief overview of what the scam is, as well as provide you with a link that you can click on to different federal websites where you can read not only more information and legislation about those scams, but also possible reporting options. So now I'll turn it back to Maria to talk about more information on the site.
So I just want to point out our Get Involved section. The Elder Justice Initiative is committed to encouraging awareness about elder abuse, and so has created the Get Involved, Get Safe series. These are ready-to-go PowerPoints with speaking notes that you can use to do training for seniors, community groups, or professionals. We also have included brochures for handouts in your presentation. I'm going to click on this so you can take a look. So we have two types of presentations available here for your use. And the first one is Stopping Financial Abuse. If you click on this, you're going to have a PowerPoint show that's ready to go. And if you click here, you'll see that same PowerPoint show with a speaking guide, which you can use if you want to or not. It's up to you. We also have a handout that's available for you. And over here, we have elder abuse brochures that are print ready. You can download them, and they are a good component to use with your PowerPoint presentation. Down here is our general elder abuse presentation, again with a PowerPoint and a presenter's guide. So we feel that education is one of the first steps in stopping elder abuse, so we hope that you feel free to use these presentations as you go about your work as advocates. Okay, let's go back. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about, just briefly, about the prosecutor section. Now this section is designed for prosecutors, but is also helpful for victim specialists. I would suggest looking at the prosecutor training and resources section right here. I'm going to click on it quickly. And you'll see that there is a number of different topics here that would be very beneficial to victim advocates. In fact, I think all of them would be, but I would say definitely to look at our investigation and charging. These are all videos that you would be watching talking about these subjects. Investigating and charging, who in the community is involved and how they can help, and working with older victims. I mean, those are definitely topics that I think would be beneficial to victim specialists. In addition, under this prosecutor section, We have information on laws, elder justice task forces, and later you're going to talk about, Keely's going to talk about the MDT Technical Resource Center later. There will be webinars on all of this information on the OVC-TTAC website. So now we're going to talk about victim specialists, which you've all been waiting for. All right, on our victim specialist page are different topics. And the first one is reporting obligations. Let's click on that. So there are many types of victim specialists and victim service providers, and some states list these professions in the state's list of mandatory reporters of elder abuse. I'm going to go ahead and start clicking on this now. By clicking this link, you will come to the National Adult Protective Services Agency survey of reporting requirements. And you can see it's listed by state and by who is supposed to report. So look at your state to see if you are listed as a mandatory reporter of elder abuse. And we'll talk a little bit more about adult protective services later, but Keely's now going to talk to us about victims' rights.
So one area that I recommend everyone familiarize yourself with is this section here on victims' rights. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Crime Victims' Rights Act, which will take you further into this section. So under the Crime Victims' Rights Act, you'll find all of the rights afforded to crime victims at the federal level. All 50 states have adopted some version of these rights, and most states have adapted them into their state constitutions. But for more information on your specific state, I'd recommend that you just do like a Google search with your state and then crime victims' rights in order to find the specific rights afforded to each crime victim in your state. Most states have copied them word for word, though. So briefly, crime victims have the right to be protected from the accused, to have notice of public court proceedings, to not be excluded from those proceedings, to be heard at them, to the right to talk with the attorney, the right to restitution, to unreasonable delay from proceedings, and to be treated with fairness and respect for their dignity, to be informed in a timely manner of any plea bargain or deferred prosecution, and then also to be informed of these rights. So two of the most important ones for you to be aware of are the rights to be treated with fairness and dignity, as well as the right to be informed of their rights. Older adults are coming into the criminal justice system with some major disadvantages, including ageism. As an advocate, it's extremely important that you inform them of their rights within this setting and ensure that they're being treated as you would expect to be treated in that setting. So below that, then we have the Attorney General Office Guidelines for Victims and Witness Assistance. So these provide guidelines for federal agencies for making accommodations for things such as travel arrangements, court support, so if someone needs a wheelchair, hearing devices, things like that. If you have any questions on how you can make accommodations in your setting, I recommend that you take a look at that resource. And below that, the final resource in this area, we have the Victims' Rights and Restitution Act, which ensures that victims receive mandated services, including referrals to emergency medical and social services, reasonable protection from suspected offenders, notice of the status of investigations, and notice of court proceedings. Now I'll pass it back to Maria to talk about the federal webinars on the site.
So the Elder Justice Initiative has started this section on federal webinars to show what federal agencies are doing to assist older victims of crime. These webinars also provide tips for victim specialists and tips for older adults on how to prevent abuse. Let's click on the first one. Come on. All right, here we go. So the first one was done by the U.S. Attorney's Office. And this has special considerations for assistant U.S. attorneys and victim specialists. They discuss all types of elder abuse on this webinar and has case examples and emphasize teamwork and effective responses to elder abuse. Our second one was done by the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. It has a postal inspection analyst and a national victim specialist talking about cases such as romance scams and lottery scams. They discuss real case examples. And our final one, and we do have more to come in the coming year, this one here was done by the Department of Homeland Security, ICE. They investigate investigate crimes such as overseas lottery scams that affect seniors. Learn how the victim specialists and the special agents work together on cases involving older adults. Examples include cases about identity theft, Jamaican lottery scams, Canadian lottery scams, and more. Keely's now going to speak to us about helpful information and training for victim specialists.
So you've probably noticed that there are a lot of resources on the EJI webpage, which is good and very helpful, but it can be overwhelming. So I'm just going to go through a few of these under the helpful information and training for victim specialists section that I think you should be aware of. But I highly recommend you take the time to go through and familiarize yourself with all of these agencies that work with victims and older adults. So first we have the Office for Victims of Crime, and the biggest thing that we want to let you know about on their website is this OVC TTAC, where you can register to take trainings, and you can take specific trainings on topics related to elder abuse. And each training that you complete, you then get a certificate at the end. I think they have something like over 50 trainings so far on different topics, all different crimes and populations, and I've done all of them so far, and I found them to be very helpful. Next here is the National Center for Victims of Crime. And on our website, you'll find information and resources for victims and providers, including trainings, information on the Victim Connect directory and hotline, resources on all of our programs like the Financial Crime Resource Center and the Stalking Resource Center, information on the National Compassion Fund, and information on our National Training Institute, which is in December this year, and there's still time to submit proposals for presentations if you are interested. Next, I want to let you know about the National Clearinghouse on Abuse in Later Life. This is a great agency to be aware of. They have a ton of information and resources for advocates and about elder abuse. They also adapted the Domestic Violence Power and Control Wheel into the Abuse in Later Life Wheel, so that's a good resource to know about on their website, so you should check that out. And through the Center for Elders in Courts, there's one resource I want to show you. If you click on elder abuse, they have toolkits for prosecutors and the courts, but for victim service providers, this is also very helpful. So under prosecution performance measures, they have this checklist, and when you pop up the checklist, it's on how to work with older victims. So interviewing strategies, and then also how to prepare for court. So a lot of these are just very helpful resources. And then the last one here is the Multidisciplinary Team Technical Assistance Center that Maria mentioned earlier. So this was created through the EJI, and this one, they provide services at no cost to those working on developing a multidisciplinary team in their community. Services include responding to requests for relevant materials and information, and providing phone and on-site consultations. For more information, contact Lisa Gwynn Schaefer. She is the technical advisor, and her information is right down here. So now I'll pass it back to Maria.
Right. So now we're going to talk learn more about elder abuse and financial exploitation. And as you notice, we have many links on the Victim Specialist page. We tried to list links for all federal agencies who in some way are helping older victims, and other organizations who are helping as well, who have useful information for you. We wanted to gather all relevant sites and have them in one place for victim specialists to see and use. So I'm not going to be able to go through all the links, but all of them are good. Of course, the first one is Elder Justice, Victims, Families, and Caregivers. I won't click on that again since I already showed it to you, but I will click on the National Center on Elder Abuse. So this is a National Resource Center and an absolute authority in the area of elder abuse. And I often use this site when I was an advocate to get up-to-date information on training and best practices. If you are a professional or a student, you can also join their listserv, which is a forum for students and professionals who work in the area of elder abuse. Great site. I also want to click on another great site, which is the National Adult Protective Services Association. Learn about what Adult Protective Services does and how they can help. And I also want to show you that they have, under their Get Informed, they have a great checklist. Of course, they talk about what abuse is, but underneath that is a checklist of when you need to report to Adult Protective Services. This is a great list to review. Another one on here that's great, of course they all are good, but the Federal Trade Commission. They're a leader in protecting seniors from financial abuse. On here, talks about how to file a complaint, how to report identity theft, how to get a free credit report, and how to register for the Do Not Call list. They also have great brochures on financial abuse that are available. So we have many links on this site, and unfortunately we don't have the time to go over all of them. But now Keely's going to talk to us a little bit about our next section on here, which is hotlines and resources to share with seniors.
So there's quite a few hotlines out there for victims and providers to utilize, and we just wanted to share with you a few that are very helpful. So we have the AARP Fraud Watch and Network, which this one is very helpful, where you can find alerts, tips, and resources on elder financial exploitation. You can also watch a live fraud report map to see what types of fraudulent activity is being reported in your area. Medicare also has a fraud hotline where you can report Medicare fraud and also learn about current scams that are being used and also how to prevent them. The U.S. Senate Special Committee on Aging has a fraud hotline that concerns seniors. You can also watch Senate hearings on aging and financial exploitation right on their website. So through the National Center, we have Victim Connect. We have our hotline, which I will talk more about later. The Elder Care Locator connects older adults and their families with local resources, including connecting them to their local area agency on aging, which provides a lot of resources, as well as their local ombudsman programs. Benefits Checkup. This is a really useful one. This is where providers and older adults can find assistance with things like food, prescriptions, and utilities. This can be very important when you're working with older victims of crime that might mention that they haven't had access to food, or maybe had their electricity shut off a month ago and you're not really sure what to do. You can utilize Benefits Checkup with them. And then we have the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care. This is a very useful resource if you're not familiar with your local ombudsman program and come across a senior that experienced victimization in a nursing home setting. So now I'll pass it back to Maria.
So here we are in our final section, which is materials to use in elder abuse presentations. And I already went over the Elder Justice Initiative's Get Involved, Get Safe series. Another great one here, I'll just go over a couple, is In Their Own Words, Domestic Abuse in Later Life. This is a very, I guess I'd say, touching story about a 98-year-old woman who was sexually assaulted by her grandson, and it is a great movie to use in presentations. Another one I use quite often was An Age for Justice, Confronting Elder Abuse in America. And this one has all the different types of abuse, and it shows a wide, diverse variety of people who have been abused. And I highly recommend that one as well. So I just want to touch briefly on two other sections that we haven't mentioned, and that is the research and related literature. You can find out more about this on our general Elder Justice Initiative website webinar that came out. But basically this section has all kinds of literature on scientific, legal, and databases on elder abuse. And this section here, our press room, highlights Department of Justice cases that they are working on or have successfully prosecuted. So now I'm going to turn it to Keely, and we need to go back to our PowerPoint at this point. So we reviewed the victim specialist page. Okay, here we go. Keely, take it from here.
Now we'd like to do our final poll question. So have any of you heard of Victim Connect outside of this webinar? So it looks like most of you haven't. So yay, now I'm going to tell you about it. Okay, So Victim Connect, like I've mentioned, is part of the National Center for Victims of Crime. So it's the Victim Connect Resource Center, and it's made up of a team of about 5 victim assistance specialists that answer calls, texts, and chats from crime victims, providers, family members, concerned neighbors, basically anyone that has a crime-related question from all across the country. It's a completely anonymous hotline. They don't collect any personal identifying information. And when victims call, they try to connect them with resources in their area, including mental health services, victim compensation, legal services, support groups, agencies for crime reporting, as well as providing safety planning. So the Victim Connect people don't provide direct services because it is an anonymous hotline that's located in DC, but when we answer calls, we do try to connect you with local resources that maybe you haven't heard of before. So the hotline hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The phone number, if you wanted to call, is 855-4VICTIM or 855-484-2846. Feel free to visit victimconnect.org and browse our directory, which we have where you can find victim service programs in your state. You can also request that your agency be added to our directory, and you can find more information on how to assist victims.
Okay, so we've come to the end of our webinar, and we want to thank you for taking the time to learn about the Elder Justice website, but we especially want to thank you for taking an interest in this underserved population. We hope that by working together we can address the many problems surrounding this very important issue. Please know that the work you're doing really makes a positive impact for those older adults in our communities. I guess we're ready to take some questions. And those that we can't get to today, we'll try to answer at a later time. You can also submit them to the Elder Justice address that we have up here. But I'm looking at the first question here, which says, do you have specific sections related to domestic violence situations? And I would say, Chris, that in our victims, families, and caregivers section, there are domestic violence situations interspersed throughout the different types of abuse. So there's not just one section devoted to domestic violence, but there's domestic violence stories interspersed throughout that whole section.
So Pamela asks, can you tell us when and where the conference is in December? Sure. So the conference in December is in Portland, Oregon, and I believe it's at the beginning of December. I think it's like the 5th through the 7th, something like that. If you go to victimsofcrime.org, it'll be one of the, in the carousel that pops up on the main page. If you click through, it'll be one of those little blurbies that pop up, but I know it's in Portland, Oregon in December.
Okay, this one here. Deanna asks, what can a son do when after the victim has been placed under guardianship and the POA revoked, and after doing some investigating there was financial and mental abuse to the victim? I would definitely say to make a report to Adult Protective Services would be one of the first things to do. Do you have any other suggestions, Keely? Reporting to law enforcement as well. If there's evidence of financial abuse, you definitely need, and mental abuse. And if this is, if it's a son, well, yeah, he definitely wants someone to look into that because, you know, it's only going to get worse. Here we go.
Yeah, you can also look through the different directories, so either the directory that's on the EJI website or on victimconnect.org. There's a directory there to try to find local aging agencies in the area where this person lives and see if they have any advocacy work that can be done.
Okay, I see Ellen is asking about the pamphlet in our handout section. Ellen, I will definitely check into why that isn't printing right. And if we can't get that fixed, we'll try to get something to you.
So I see a follow-up from Deanna. It says, so the son could still report to the police. If someone is suspecting financial abuse, yeah, you can always report that to the police.
Okay, great. We'll wait a few more minutes to see if there's any other questions. All right, James. Look at James. James responded. Thank you, James.
Hi, this is Lana from OVCT Tech. I don't know if you saw there's another question in the pod. How do we weed out false claims?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that means either.
Got it.
We're not, neither one of us are attorneys, so not sure the answer to that. Okay, so I see something about threats from the power of attorney. Were they? I'd like to know a little bit more about that. Are they physical threats? Are they? Okay.
For Deanna, if there's anything going on with the power of attorney, it might be helpful to look for like possible elder legal services if they exist in the state, and if there's threats and you're making an APS report, be sure to let them know about that as well.
Yeah, and in some jurisdictions, those threats might be considered a crime, depending on what they are. I see a question here about where are the handouts located. Under the Get Involved, Get Safe section there, I think it's on the financial abuse page.
Yeah.
If you click on that, the handouts are right next to the PowerPoint presentation and the speaking guides. Okay, let's see. I see some suggestions here in our chat. We are very open to suggestions and comments, and so feel free to email us at the ElderJustice email address. Oh, hi Tracy. And thank you, Trudy. It's great to have all these people who are resources here watching our presentation, right, Keely?
Yes.
We have a great community in the elder abuse area. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any more? Or? Good.
That's all the way down.
Okay. Okay, let's see if we have any other questions.
If you think of any questions in the future, please feel free to email them to elder.justice@usdoj.gov. Also, if you are working with a victim or just have a question and you just want to talk to an advocate, feel free to call the Victim Connect hotline and you can speak with a victim assistance specialist about the situation, all totally anonymously, and we can try to assist you as well. Oh, and for those that said that you were interested in more training on elder abuse, if you want to follow up and send an email to the ElderJustice email address, and
Yeah.
just give us more information on what kind of training you're looking for. That'd be great.
Yes, we plan to follow up with any of you who want more training, so please contact us, and we'll be back in touch with you on how to get that accomplished.
Great, thank you. This is Lena again with OVC TTAC. I just wanted to do a last call for any questions. Otherwise, just a reminder, the webinar will be available, the recording will be available on the TTAC website in case some of you missed a portion or some of the audio on the recording. Otherwise, if there are no other questions, Maria and Keely, thank you so much for the webinar this afternoon.
You're welcome. We were glad to be here.
Yep. Thanks for having us. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.